Thank you for joining me. These are Day Texts with Greg Stafford, where we meet every weekday morning at 5 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to consider a portion of the biblical record or other related texts, histories, sources of knowledge and wisdom that we can use to start our day, end our day, or throughout our day, either today or tomorrow, whichever it fits for you. But we're working our way through the New Testament so that we can better educate ourselves together and take from what we read things that, as I mentioned, will benefit us during our day. That's why we call them day texts. So we are in the book, we are starting actually today, the book of Titus. Book of Titus. Titus is a figure mentioned in the Bible in other letters, like Paul's letter to the Galatians, where he talks about in chapter 2 being with Titus while dealing with a number of issues pertaining to the Jews at that time, who were still having a hard time separating themselves from adherence to the Mosaic law. Specifically in Galatians, the issue had to do with circumcision. And Titus was a Greek whom Paul wrote about in Galatians 2 as one who would not submit to the Jews' pressure to become circumcised, though he was a Greek. So Paul ended up writing a letter to Titus, and he appears to have written it around the time when he took a trip into Macedonia from Ephesus, around 66-67 CE, which was really the start of a very difficult period leading up to the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. The letter to Titus is well represented, as are all of the New Testament and Old Testament biblical books and letters. Titus has representation in the early papyri P32, part of the John Rylands collection, dated to the mid to late 2nd century CE, as well as support in Aleph, the Codex Sinaiticus, Codex Alexandrinus, and Codex Vaticanus. So again, we have a good textual history for the letter of Titus, as well as other references to Titus in other letters written by Paul. So I have not translated all of the verses in the letter of Titus. And when we do these day texts, I group together the verses that I have translated in what I call the Great Message translation. You can read what I have done online at the Christian Witnesses of Jah discussion forum page. But when we do these day texts, I group together some of the verses that I have done, and then we make an application according to the things that we read and that were taught in the first century, according to what we see today. And then we make a brief application, and that's the video. So I will go ahead and do that. I'll start reading from the letter of Titus. I'm going to start in verse 15. I'm going to read verses 15 and 16 of chapter 1. And then I'm going to read chapter 2, verse 1. Oftentimes in these letters and books, you'll have greetings and expressions of praise. And I don't usually include those in our day text because we're already well familiar with them. And even though we should read them and offer similar expressions according to the things that we have toward God, we're here to try to gain information and knowledge beyond what we already know, or to reinforce some of the things that we may know but have forgotten a little bit. So we try to focus on the things that are not as commonly expressed, like thanks and praise, and deal with more of the instruction and information that they provide in terms of the people and the times in which they lived. Okay, so let me read verses 15 and 16 from chapter 1, and then I'll read chapter 2, verse 1, make a brief application, and we'll be on our way. Okay, Titus 1:15 states, "All things are ready for use to those who are ready for use. But to those who have become hazards and to those who are without faith, nothing is ready. Indeed, it is their mind which has been made unfit for use, as well as their conscience. They openly claim to have come to know God, but by what they do, they disown him. These types of people I'm talking about are disgusting. They do not listen to anyone. When it comes to every single good work, they are worthless. By contrast, you must speak things which are deserving of respect in association with curing instruction. Let's take a look back here at some of the things that he said. So he starts off by saying, look, everything's ready for use if you are ready for use. And that's really the question, right? Are you ready for use? Are you ready for use by job, by Jesus? Are you ready for use by anyone? Your employer, others in your community to do good work? Or are you worthless when it comes to any type of good work? You don't want to be like that. Good works are what we were made to do. We weren't made to fight. We don't have weapons, claws, sharp teeth. We don't have the kind of battle skin and toughness that animals have. We were made to love and do good work and to use our mind and our spirit, not physical might to get our way. So there are those who have become hazards because they don't do anything. They don't do anything good. Their mind and their conscience has been made unfit for use. And verse 16 is really the key, because even though this may be the case with some, and I have examples, and we're not here to judge people. We're observing them based on what they do, like Paul did. Because if we can't observe people and look at the things that they do, the fruit from their tree, we're not going to be able to determine anything. This has nothing to do with making a permanent judgment about someone's eternal future. It has to do with using your brain and looking at what someone's doing, making sure that's what they want to do, and then realizing, okay, that's who this person is right now. This is what they represent. This is what they're doing. And then you have to make a decision. Okay? You have to decide to what extent you want to be a part of their production, or you want to separate yourself or limit your involvement. But if it's someone who openly claims they know God and they disown him by everything they do, it's not going to benefit you very much. And you notice in verse 16 he says they don't listen to anyone. I've met people like this, and I've known people like this. And as amazing as it was, I had someone not too long ago acting very strangely toward me and demanding things in ways that were really ridiculous, not listening to anything. And yet at the same time, this person made, in my opinion, incorrect accusations about me, and actually called God down upon me, and said God's gonna, something negative toward me about God, even though they were the ones who had been lying for over a decade and disrespecting me in ways that were intolerable. So there are people like this. They don't listen to anyone. They think they're closer to God than you. Now, I don't believe I'm anything special beyond what I'm called to do, but I think it's pretty stupid of a person to call down God on someone who's trying to serve God when they're not. They're not even trying to serve God. They're just so upset about not getting their way, like a child, that they start using God's name in vain, even against people who are actually trying to respect God. How do you think that's going to go for that person? If you call down God on someone who's serving God and you don't serve God, that's one of the stupidest things you could ever do. Because the very first thing God is going to do is come to you. You, the one who does not even serve him. And yet you call down upon him towards one who does? That's never going to go well for you. And I highly recommend you never call down Jah on anyone. Because the very first person he's going to come to is you. And if you're not prepared for that evaluation, there's no way he's going to listen to you and go evaluate somebody else just because you had a little childish moment where you couldn't deal with an adult yourself. So there are people out there, they're children, They're adult children. They have not learned anything but how to pleasure themselves at other people's expense. They don't really seek to get along with persons unless you do what they want you to do. They're not here to submit to anybody because they don't even know what that involves. As I've said before, using women as an example, Christian women. Women today, if you ask them, how do you submit to a man? I don't know what you're going to hear from them. If you ask a man how he submits to God, I'm pretty sure I could tell you what he might say. Same with a woman who submits to God. I'm pretty sure that it would be easy to show that the things they do and don't do reflect the submission that they're talking about. Well, how do we submit to each other? Right? Whether it's a man or a woman or a man and a man. Did not Jesus himself wash his disciples' feet? How many of you have washed a fellow Christian's feet? Was that not a command? Did Jesus not say, in the same way that I did to you, you are to do to each other? How many Christians today really take care of each other like that? Not many. Not many. And not many non-Christians do that either. But Jesus did that. And if you're going to follow Jesus, you have to stop putting yourself above other people. You have to stop pretending you don't need to submit to anyone. And you have to stop pretending that you serve Jah if you only serve yourself. And you don't do the things that Jah and those who have worshipped him for thousands of years have historically shown is his will. Our design, our world, it all tells us every day what we're supposed to do and not do. But for some people, nobody is ready. We all make mistakes, but sometimes people, it's not a mistake. They're choosing to do things that really have no value to anyone and avoiding good works that have value to almost everyone. That's why he says in verse 16, when it comes to every single good work, they are worthless. So it's not our job to go around trying to find people to describe this way, but it is our job to be aware and alert to people who fit this description. Because if we don't, we're going to associate ourselves with people who are going to act like they know God, and then the second you don't listen to what they say, they're going to call God down on you. It makes no sense whatsoever. And so there are a lot of people out there in the world that we're going to find ourselves associated with. And a lot of them are going to be like this, like the types of persons that Paul and Titus had to deal with in the first century. As I mentioned in Galatians, Paul refers to Titus as someone who would not yield to the false brothers, the false Jewish brothers who were trying to pressure people, including Peter, in that very same chapter in Galatians chapter 2, trying to pressure non-Jews to conform to the Mosaic law. Well, what do we have today? We have other Christians trying to pressure people to conform to what they believe is God's law, when in fact we are told repeatedly and clearly that we stand before Jah and we are not to judge anyone else. We can look at their fruit. We can make determinations so that we ourselves don't fall into a trap. But we have to, in that same action, leave that person or those persons be, knowing that they are going to have to make a stand. And if they're not ready to make a stand with you or with me right now, wait until they are. Separate yourselves from people who are not going to help you stay strong. If you're a man and you're seeking a woman for companionship as a Christian, and she won't listen to you in terms of a headship, as far as allowing you to take the lead. I'm not talking about women listening to men when they say stupid things or things that are obviously not right or where they need help. We all need help. It's very easy to say, hey, wait a minute. You might not have thought that through. Are you sure you want to do this? What's so hard about that? And then if the man is sensible, he's going to listen if the woman is right. But women today have, in large part, either failed or forgotten what it even means to submit to a man. That's why that people can't have relationships today, because you have women trying to usurp the role of the man and the man devolving into the role of the woman. I say devolving because the man wasn't made as a woman. He was made as a man. And yet you have men today who are going through sex changes to try to conform to what they identify as their gender. You have women today doing the same thing. So there's a certain type of man and woman that will display the characteristics that show they understand how they were made. And those are the kinds of people you should be around. And the second a woman starts to disagree and openly argue with you, and you're a man, a Christian man, you immediately separate yourself from that conversation. Unless it's your wife or someone you have to live with, in which case she shouldn't be burdening you that way anyway. Not if she's trying to be a Christian. Okay? If she's not a Christian, well, then you have to do your best to deal with the situation and help her appreciate your role as a man anyway. If you're a woman and your man is abusing you and he's not showing love to you and he claims to be a Christian, it's not that hard to reference a few texts and ask a question. How are you showing love in this way? You can do that. You can ask your man questions. You're supposed to ask him questions. He's the very one you're supposed to go to for all of your questions. And if he can't answer them, then you both go to somebody else who can help you. But you shouldn't be running around engaging all these different men to try to find information when you already have a man. That's who you go to if you're a woman. If you're a man, you go to your woman for things involving your household or the affairs of your life. I'm not going to get into too much involving men and women in relationships right now. I will in a separate show. But it's kind of on my mind since the sexual show and other things. And we're having such a difficult time today having relationships with men and women. It's like people have forgotten how we're made. And it's not that hard to give yourself a reminder. I highly recommend you do so. Otherwise, you're going to have a very miserable life. Like Paul says, when men and women get together, there is tribulation. And so maybe it's best to stay apart or alone or not to have an intimate relationship with someone else, especially nowadays when we live in a society where there's really no culture. There's no cultural appreciation for marriage or for men and women to have a normal heterosexual relationship. I mean, they're trying to promote everything else. So it doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means that we need to be careful because the relationships people are having today are complicating lives rather than simplifying them. Remember in the text it says that there are some who have become hazards. They're like hazards, like hazard signs, warning, high winds, flooding ahead. We have to be able to read the signs, whether it's people whose mind has been made unfit for use and their conscience, like we read in today's text, or whether it's a person, a man who won't treat a woman correctly, or whether it's a woman who refuses to respect a man. All of those things are unacceptable in a Christian sense, and they should not be cultivated or furthered. We should help to limit the way people promote those things by not being a part of it. When you don't support somebody who does these kinds of things, they'll stop. They'll realize it's not working. They're not getting their way by acting ridiculous or by trying to do the opposite of everything that is normally productive and helpful, which is often what we see today. People trying to do the opposite, create chaos. The way you avoid that is by doing the things that Jah told us to do, by acting the way Jah made us to live. It's not that difficult. It can be difficult because of our desires and sinful tendencies, but the answer is pretty clear. The answers are obvious. It's just sometimes dealing with them is difficult for us. And that's why we keep talking about it. And so it becomes easier, hopefully, for us in the future. In any case, try to stay around people who show respect. That's one of the best ways you can identify a person worthy of your time. Verse 1, chapter 2 of Titus, today's text. By contrast, you must speak things which are deserving of respect in association with curing instruction. If people will not respect you because you're trying to live a moral life and you speak about Jah and Jesus and you're trying to help other people, leave them. Get away from them and do not spend your time with people who aren't going to help you. Let them go spend their time doing whatever they want. Exactly what are they going to do? What is better than praising Jah, following Jesus, and treating others the way you want to be treated? Tell me one thing in this earth that is of more benefit than any one of those three. Nothing. And all of those three include everything else in moderated measures that we can enjoy and benefit from. So worshiping Jah, following Jesus, treating others the way we want to be treated, we still get to enjoy things in the world. We still get to have sexual relationships with people if we choose to. It just keeps us from going into excessive levels of self-pleasure or promotion or seeking things in a material way that are going to distract us from the three most important things. That's what these texts are all about. That's what the letters and books of the Bible really are about. In addition to providing history and instruction, they're preparing us for the things that everybody else before us had to deal with and go through. And so when you're reading about Paul writing to Titus, and you understand the context of his involvement with these false Jewish brothers and others who were pressuring Greek or non-Jewish Christians with regard to the law, and then you had people like Paul who knew the law, former practicing Jew, trying to bring the two sides together, right? The Jews, Peter, and then the Greeks, Titus. All of these things are present today as well in ways that we have to deal with. We have to try. We have to confront people at times, like Paul confronted Peter and said, no, that's not how we act. That's not what the great message is about. But by and large, we're here to build each other up and to help other people so they can deal with the difficulties of life and have a hope for the future. Okay, I know I got a little bit off on some of the relational issues, but really, when you read these texts, Titus 1:15, 16, and 2:1, it's talking about relationships. In a general sense, he's talking about people in general. Doesn't name anyone specifically today. But nonetheless, we can apply these things in ways in our lives to help us avoid people who clearly are not helping us become better people. And you will find that often there will be people who, when you're trying to better yourself, they'll try to stop you. Misery loves company. Either way, you have to make your own choices. You have to decide what you're going to do and with whom you're going to do it. But I will help you if I can. And so I appreciate you meeting with me on our day texts and in our Saturday shows, because it helps us to go over these things together. And then when we're apart, we can remember them and make use of them. All right, let me just check the questions real quickly here. So, we don't do a lot of questions in the day text shows, but they're fairly informal, as you can tell. And I think there was a question about going to church or staying home. And really, church is a gathering or group of people. It's become a reference to a building where the people meet. But congregations, churches really are the people. So really, the congregation is wherever the people are. And as Christian witnesses of Jah, we don't spend money and time and resources obtaining other locations in which to meet. And we're not prohibited from doing that, but we usually have homes in which we can meet, just like the early Christians met in homes. That way you have control over the people that come into your home. So if it's someone who's clearly not there to support the great message, you can kindly ask them to leave. And also it's more private, and you're more able to assist people in a personal way if they need it. So I think it's a great arrangement all around, and I'm confident that as we grow, people will make more use of it. And then maybe you can even connect with each other in different homes, to share an interchange of encouragement across the internet while you're meeting in homes. I'm sure there are going to be times where a multitude of home congregations can meet together via the internet and benefit from some type of instruction. So we're just sort of getting started in that way. And I will continue to promote and participate in everything I can where people will benefit from as it concerns the great message. So keep telling me your arguments, ideas, not arguments, but ideas. Well, arguments sometimes. I mean, we'll argue if we have to establish a point, but we're not here for overkill. We're not here to waste our time fighting with people over things we've already shown are true in our view, and they can either accept or reject. Plenty of other people for us to help if we have the time. So, okay, and then CW Jaw Talk show number 10 this Saturday. I have a few ideas, and this one idea keeps coming to mind on a show called We're Next. And it would be a series of statements that I have in mind to make about reminding us we're next in a number of ways. So I might do that. I'm not going to give you a lot of detail, but it'll be about everything coming our way. Everything that came the way of everyone who came before us, and everything coming toward us now, since we're next. I might do that. But I'm open to other ideas, and I have a few other topics. So it's just one I've been thinking more and more about, because I kind of like the idea of getting us to think about what's coming. Just a little bit. Because we're next. All right, I appreciate everybody joining me today, and thank you so much for the time that you give. I will be back tomorrow for another day text as we're working our way through Titus, and I'll talk a little bit more about CW Jaw Talk 10 as we work our way through to Saturday. So thank you all once again. Have a wonderful day, and may Jah bless you. In Jesus' name, thank you.